Today, we are diving into something huge, the United Nations Master Plan to build a better world by the year 2030. We're going to break down this massive global vision and then zoom in on one country, Brazil, to see how they're actually trying to turn these giant goals into real, on-the-ground action. So, let's get into it.
I mean, really think about that question. How do you create a plan to fix the world? It sounds almost impossible, right? But that is exactly what the global community set out to do. We're not talking about solving one tiny problem. We're talking about a single blueprint for everything, for everyone. So where on earth do you even begin?
Here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the big picture, the global plan itself. Then we're going to zoom right into Brazil to see how they've stitched this plan into their own national policies. After that, we'll go even deeper, down to the community level, to see how these ideas actually show up in people's daily lives. And finally, we'll pull all the way back out to see how Brazil is leveraging all this work to take a leading role on the world stage.
Okay, so first things first. What exactly is this grand plan for the world? This is where we get into the 2030 Agenda and its very famous Sustainable Development Goals. You've probably heard of them as the SDGs.
Think of the 2030 Agenda as a global promise. Back in 2015, every single member of the UN, all 193 of them, signed on to this shared to-do list for humanity. And at the very heart of it are these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. They cover pretty much everything from wiping out poverty and hunger to fighting climate change and pushing for peace and justice. It really is a universal call to action.
So, to make those 17 goals a little easier to digest, they're organized around these 5 pillars, what they call the 5 Ps. And what's so smart about this is that it shows you how everything is connected. You can't really have prosperity if the planet is falling apart, right? And you're not going to get peace if people's basic needs aren't being met. It forces everyone to look at the whole picture.
And if there's one phrase that sums up the entire spirit of the agenda, it's this one: leave no one behind. Now, this is way more than just a nice motto. It's a promise to focus on the most vulnerable people first. And in a country like Brazil, with its own complex history of inequality, this isn't some abstract idea. It's a very real and practical guide for where to put your energy. Okay, so that's the big idea. But here's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? How does a country actually take these amazing, inspiring global goals and turn them into, well, boring stuff like laws and budgets and government programs? To figure that out, let's look at Brazil's national blueprint. All right, let's open up Brazil's playbook. This is where we see the nuts and bolts of how they're taking those 17 global goals and making them a central part of how the government actually plans and operates.
Now, Brazil didn't just wake up in 2015 and decide to get on board with this. They've been a huge part of this conversation for decades. I mean, way back in 1972, they were already at the table arguing that you can't talk about the environment without talking about the economy and society. They hosted the famous Rio Earth Summits, and get this, the very idea for the SDGs was basically born in Brazil at the Rio +20 conference in 2012. So this is a long-term thing for them.
And here's the key tool that makes it all real, the PPA. You can think of it as the government's 4-year master plan. It's the official document that connects every major goal directly to the federal budget. And for the current cycle, from 2024 to 2027, Brazil made a very conscious choice to build the entire plan around the Sustainable Development Goals.
And you can see this connection crystal clear. Their famous social program, Bolsa Familia, is explicitly designed to tackle SDG 1, no poverty. The country's affordable housing initiative directly addresses SDG 11, sustainable cities. It's a straight line from the global goal right down to a national program with a real budget.
And we're not just talking about a few pet projects here. The scale of this is massive. In the current PPA, there are 88, that's 88, different government programs that are officially tied to achieving the SDGs. It just goes to show you how deeply this global agenda is now woven into the fabric of Brazil's national planning.
Okay, so there's a national plan. That's great. But for any of this to actually matter, it has to make a difference on the streets, in neighborhoods, in real communities. And that brings us to this really important, kind of tricky concept called territorialization.
So what is territorialization? The simplest way to think about it is making the global local. It's this core idea that a solution that works for a big city in the Amazon is probably not going to work for a small farming town in the South. It's all about empowering mayors, city councils, and local people to take the SDG framework and actually adapt it to solve their own unique problems, building solutions from the ground up.
And this quote from a local group in São Paulo just nails it.
For leaders in a city, the SDGs aren't some abstract, far-off ideal. They're a practical tool, like a diagnostic test, that they can use to get a full checkup on their city's health and figure out exactly what they need to work on.
And this really shows you why that local approach is so crucial. A top-down, one-size-fits-all plan sent from the capital city risks being totally disconnected from what's actually happening on the ground. But the local-led approach, the very heart of territorialization, it puts the power in the hands of communities to make sure the solutions are relevant and that citizens actually get a say in the process.
And when cities really grab onto this, the payoff is huge. They just get better at solving their own problems. It makes different city departments that maybe never talk to each other, like transportation and public health, start working together. And, maybe most importantly, it gives local leaders a common language to explain to their citizens what they're trying to do and how they're making progress. Okay, we've gone from global to national, all the way down to local. So for our last section, let's zoom back out and see how all of this work at home is setting Brazil up to be a real leader on the world stage again.
One of the clearest signs of this is that in 2025, the eyes of the world are going to be on Brazil as it hosts COP30. That's the huge UN climate change conference. And get this, they're hosting it in the city of Belém, right in the Amazon rainforest. That sends a pretty powerful message about where their priorities are. But Brazil's leadership isn't just about hosting big events. They are actively trying to shape the future of this whole global agenda. Which leads to a fascinating question. The world agreed on 17 goals. Is that it? Is the story over? Well, here's Brazil's answer. This is a truly groundbreaking move. Brazil is formally proposing that the world add an 18th Sustainable Development Goal, one focused specifically and explicitly on racial equity. This idea comes directly from their own national experience of confronting deep historic inequalities. They're basically saying that you can't have real sustainable development if you don't tackle racial injustice head-on.
So what would this new goal actually mean? Well, it's a simple but incredibly powerful idea that where you end up in life shouldn't depend on your racial or ethnic background. By putting this on the global table, Brazil is taking its own hard-earned lessons and telling the world that true, lasting sustainability is impossible without racial justice at its core. And that brings us right back to our very first question. Can a huge global plan really change a local community? Well, as we've seen, it's not simple, and it's not easy. But what the story of Brazil and the 2030 Agenda really shows us is that when you manage to connect that global vision to a real national blueprint and to empowered local action, the answer just might be yes.